So, welcome back everyone. Thank you for being patient during our video glitch. So, I'm just going to make one more adjustment on my screen. There we go. So, transition services are instruction-related services, community experiences, and development, including post-school adult living objectives and, when appropriate, acquisition of daily living skills. It starts no later than age 16 and continues until at least age 21. So I statements and self-determination and supported decision-making as you get closer to transition. These are some examples. I will identify a network of people that I trust to help me find a job that I'm interested in. I will work with my support network to identify 3 independent living goals. I will attend and lead my IEP team meetings, working with my network to identify goals and objectives for the year. And now remember, we're going to go according to the maximum of unique abilities for each student. So these are examples. So in January 2017, there was an update to the Department of Education Transition Guide, and they're talking about supporting the student through decisions and preparing them for adult life. So they talk about high expectations, person-centered planning, supporting their social emotional learning, and informed choice. So the transition guide talks about characteristics of self-determination. And these are all characteristics that go directly in the findings of Waymire. Speak for yourself, be a self-advocate, solve problems, set goals, make decisions, possess self-awareness, and exhibit independence. So these are all good guidelines in areas of need when you're trying to come up with goals that match self-determination for your students. Also in the transition guide, it talks about the age of majority and it talks about supported decision making. Students and their parents are advised to seek information to help them understand their options for making educational decisions. A student need not be placed under guardianship in order for his or her family to remain involved in educational decisions. Guardianship places significant restrictions on the rights of the individual. Students and parents are urged to consider information about less restrictive options. It's in the Department of Education guidelines. So alternatively, if a student does not have capacity to execute a power of attorney or prefers not to use that option, a supported decision-making arrangement can be established consistent with applicable state procedures in which the parents or other representatives assist the student in making decisions. If the student has not been determined to be incompetent but does not have the ability to provide informed consent with respect to his or her educational programs. Unlike guardianship, the student remains an autonomous decision maker in all aspects of her life. And so I'll tell you what we did with my daughter's IEP. We wrote, Kylie has a supported decision-making team. Her team members are Anne, the psychologist, and her parents, and the speech therapist. That's what our team is. So we wrote it into the legal binding document, IEP, that we're going to talk about, and that's how we did it. You can also have a supported decision-making agreement that you attach to the IEP, but it's nice to have the language that it's acknowledged that there should be least restrictive options. And Jonathan Martinez, my partner in this, has been in rooms of 1,500 teachers in Tennessee, which I go, yay! But that's just a small portion of people that are aware, so we really want to educate people and have them reference this language. So transition activities, taking part in activities in the home, in the community that relate to their interests. So if the person likes music therapy and they like to play the drum, they could be in a drum circle, they could go to music therapy because there is a college of adaptive arts that eventually they may be able to do something to participate. There are, in my area, there are bands where they have all people with exceptional abilities playing in the band. So they're talking about really getting the student involved in the community earlier on. identifying and networking with people and agencies that can provide supports and services, and identifying short and long-term goals and providers of information, service, and training. So if there are concerns that the student cannot take care of themselves, that is something that is an independent living need, and transition services are a coordinated set of activities that should be provided for adult living objectives and acquisition of daily living skills, necessarily including decision-making skills. So agencies that can be involved in the collaboration are vocational rehabilitation, disability rights, independent living centers, and Social Security Administration. We're going to talk more about vocational rehabilitation too. So there is not a one-size-fits-all. The shape of each person's dream is different. And do we know what your individual's dream is? What is it that they want? How can they participate? How can they share with you their rare and distinct wishes? So supported decision-making and vocational rehabilitation. So vocational rehabilitation is charged with preparing for, securing, retaining, advancing in, and maintaining employment. If you need something to prepare for work, vocational rehabilitation should provide it, including decision-making and self-determination skills. So you're eligible if you have a disability, if you want to work, and if you receive SSI, you're automatically eligible for vocational rehabilitation. An independent plan for employment is where they're going to talk about the supports and services and the plan for the job, and this is also a contract, a legally binding contract like the IEP and the IPP. So the big one, vocational and other training services, including the provision of personal and vocational adjustment services, books, tools, and other training materials. So 361.48, 361.48, that's the one you want to remember, because it can include assessments, counseling, job search and retention services, education, assistive technology, medical and mental health care, on-the-job training, job coaches, transportation, services to family members, temporary rent, therapy, clothing, and other goods and services determined necessary for the individual with a disability to achieve an employment outcome. So again, we're providing this information, and I have to say that, you know, in education and vocational rehabilitation, it's all challenging, and we're giving you these tools to help you be successful. And so an employment-based skill is following directions and staying on task, communicating and getting along. Would somebody hire somebody that doesn't have those skills? Life skills limitations, anything that's going to limit you, VR must provide to help you overcome them. But there's a problem. There is a lack of coordination. There's a fragmented system where high schools and adult services are not communicating with each other. So what does that have to do with conservatorship? The same skills that are going to get you a job are the same skills that you need to have to avoid guardianship. That's what we're talking about. And we talk about supports and services, and people often ask me, what does that have to do with supported decision making? It has to do with being autonomous, being independent, making choices, building skills. That's what you need to avoid being under a guardianship. So a culture of coordinated support. We have something we're going to talk about here in California called the Blueprint, but there's also another CCS, Culture of Coordinated Support, which is very similar, and that's about agencies collaborating and coordinating and working together to find a good outcome for students in education, in vocational rehabilitation and employment, medical care, and supports and services. So we're going to give you an example of a project, a pilot project in Vermont, which is amazing because it's a coordination of all the agencies working together looking for people who are at risk. I'm I'm jumping ahead because I'm excited about that. So vocational rehabilitation is about exercising informed choice. So they should have appropriate modes of communication and availability and opportunities to exercise informed choice, including support services, and for those with cognitive disabilities. So WIOA, Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, put a significant emphasis on the provision of services for people with disabilities, and that it should happen as early as possible, which led to the DOE transition guide that I shared with you. So coordination, transition services should be coordinated for community, for services, for post-adult living objectives, for the acquisition of daily living skills, to prepare them for further employment, education. And I'll tell you, at the top of the transition plan, it says, was my student involved? Yes. So I wonder if the system has an automatic check for that. And then it'll say, were agencies invited? Yes. Always it says yes, agencies were invited. Student attended. Did the student contribute? I can't tell you how many times the student did not contribute. There were no agencies invited. So it's really good to generally, when you're advocating, I think to ask a lot of questions, have them answer the questions. What agencies were invited? How was the student involved? What did they express? How did you collect that information? Did you do an assessment? What was the assessment? Can I see the protocols? So, and also talking about what their interests are and really focusing on the person. And trying to get team involvement and buy-in with that. So California Employment First policy. So there's policy in California that employment is supposed to be the #1 priority for individuals with developmental disabilities, regardless of severity. That they should be able to approximate the pattern of living for people without disabilities, and that they should be in the community, integrated in mainstream life, and be independent, productive, and have normal lives. Also, there is a 5-year plan and partnership called the Blueprint. That is between DDS, the Department of Education, and the Department of Rehabilitation. It is a 5-year plan. I think it goes 2017 through 2022. So I can tell you what the plan is, and that some parts are stagnant, some parts have moved, and we're waiting for more progress to be made on the plan. So improve collaboration and coordination, increase opportunities, and support the ability of individuals with developmental disabilities to make informed choices and to be adequately prepared to engage in competitive, integrated employment. So hand them the ball. You never know what they're going to do with the ball if you don't hand it to them. I love that. I was looking at the competitive integrated employment notes, and I saw this. So I love the visual to give to people, and that is the truth. Many times, people with disabilities are never handed the ball, so we don't know what they're capable of. So integrated employment is employment that you would find typically in the community, interacting with individuals in the community to the same extent and comparable positions. And competitive employment is in the competitive labor market at or above minimum wage. So local partnership agreements are where basically they're documenting the interagency collaboration between the 3 agencies. And so there's supposed to literally be an agreement, a tangible agreement that is created by the local education agencies. And that identifies ways in which the partners can work together and build this relationship. It can include other local community partners as well. I know that they have begun creating those agreements in many areas in the Bay Area. So they have begun to create them, and those in leadership may know where they are. People in schools don't know about it yet. So it's great to inform them. And when I was in an IEP and I brought it up, the administrator did know what I was talking about, but often teachers don't know that that's what's coming for them. So I'm excited about that. That's a really big step. Supported employment. So supported employment is for those with the most significant disabilities, to assist them to be eligible to achieve employment outcomes and in their individual plan for employment, to maintain or regain job placement and advance in employment. Supported employment is also in the Department of Education Transition Guide that came out in January 2017. It's all tied in with having high expectations. And I know that it can be very challenging qualifying somebody with an intellectual disability for supported employment. And so they have a client assistance program called a CAP advocate that can help you protect your person's rights and help facilitate the process. I do know, I hesitated to bring it up because I don't have the specifics for you, but customized employment falls under supported employment. So that could be, say, we have a guy who likes to make spaghetti. He's great at making spaghetti. And there's another guy that's great at putting the labels on the jars. And there's another guy that really wants to sell the spaghetti sauce in front of some specialized store. And that's how they could be employed. We want them to be out in the community. So I think it's important that they see their contribution, that they're acknowledged, that somebody is buying something from them. But that could be an example of customized employment. I know some regional centers in California are putting that under an umbrella called job development that is code under Health and Human Services that is actually separate from supported employment, and it's separate from vocational rehabilitation, and it allows the regional center to provide funding for that. So when I have more information about that, I wanted to have it for you today. I don't have the code for you. But if you fill out the information that you want, further supported decision-making information, I will make sure you get it. Also, I wanted to point out on the sign-up sheets that I did not provide a space to put your email address. So please do provide your email address so I can send you the slides. So I'll remind you again before the end of the day. So Medicaid and HCBS. Medicaid is, the Medicaid waiver is for people who would otherwise be in institutions, nursing homes, or hospitals. And home and community-based services goes right along with that, long-term care services in home and community-based settings. And HCBS was supposed to roll out in 2019, be finalized. It's definitely happening now, and people are being trained. And once we had a change in the presidential administration, that has been pushed out to 2021. But I believe in the state of California, they're still going to require it in 2019. So I'll give you an example. I went to a residential housing HCBS informational training, and there will be more training from state council representatives. But it was talking about somebody in a group home who may want to invite somebody over to watch TV, and they can do that. They may want to eat something else than everyone else is eating. They could do that. They may want to sit on the couch and watch a movie with their friend and eat. They could do that. So it's really a huge change in culture, and supported decision-making goes right along with all of that. And it's really about respecting the rights of people. And I think it'll be really powerful for you to see one of these videos where, you know, a highly functional person, they weren't allowed to eat unless they eat what everyone else is eating at the time that they want them to eat it. So this is just a small example of the guidelines. And there's also guidelines in HCBS for group homes about teaching them to be self-advocates, which is great. So services that are under HCBS are case management, community transition services, private nursing, family training, home and health aides, life-sustaining utility reimbursement, habilitation, and respite care. So HCBS defines the nature and the quality of the settings, and that there is community living involved in their experience, that they're integrated in the community. So for example, there's a housing property down in Santa Cruz, and they have spaces available for typically developing neurotypical individuals and also for people with disabilities, and they all live in the same area, which is great. So person-centered planning is based on interests, and I will give you some examples today, but often it's very visual, and it's a hands-on opportunity for the person to contribute to a plan. And in creating the IPP, the person-centered plan should come first. So it's really important that when we're talking about person-centered planning, which I'll tell you more about, that supported decision-making, whether you're going to be using supported decision-making, that you know about that before you get to the person-centered plan process. And the IPP identifies the goals and services and supports to increase independence and so that our individuals can participate in the community. So person-centered planning is the health and long-term services and support needs that reflect the individual's preferences. That is the main goal with person-centered planning. It's all about the individual. And there's a link that you can go to. But if you look up person-centered planning, I'm going to give you some more information. There are so many tools that can be used, and often there are visuals for somebody to understand what's important to them and what's important for them. And so why it's important that you know whether you're going to practice supported decision-making before you get to person-centered planning is because what happens if the person decides what's important to them? Who's going to decide what's important for them? And how could that differ? And so I was at a conference, the Self-Determination Conference, and there was a person speaking and a woman in a wheelchair in front of me, and she said, what do I do about a caregiver? I have desires, I want this, and my caregiver says, no, you should do this. And this is a highly functional person. She's on the board of the Self-Determination Committee. And when she asked that question, she was told, choice isn't everything. So it's really important that when you're getting to this place that you have a voice, and that even if that person needs assistance making those decisions, that it says we're going to give preference and consider the interests of the person. IPP, so the Lanterman Act is what enables us to have 21 regional centers in the state of California, and that is put in place for people to achieve maximum independence in the community. There is a state plan that the state follows every year, and there are areas, guidelines related to self-advocacy and housing, and I think it would be really important for each of us to take a look at that and use it wisely when we're in the IPP process. So services that are really important for people to practice supported decision making. Independent living skills. So those are things like self-help skills, and that can be pushed into the home. Say a person lives with a parent, they're going to be taught independent living skills so that they could be independent. That could be in a program that they're learning independent living skills, and in rare cases there are residential programs. The ARC, and I don't know which areas they have this particular program, but there's a program called Toward Independent Living, and it's used as the national example for the ARC, and that's a residential placement where they learn independent living skills. But generally, independent living skills are not residential, and supported living skills are what can be provided for people who need more support, and they can get 24/7 support. And so for instance, that housing situation that I mentioned to you, there's space for the individuals with disabilities to live in a house and also to have a supported living person there. It's accommodated. Counseling. Counseling is really important. When we talk about safety skills counseling and behavior support, social skills support, we need to be teaching them about these things. We need to be creating opportunities for people to learn, and they're never going to learn if we don't provide those experiences for them. So California's self-determination program. So I am very passionate about the self-determination program. It's an opportunity for people in California to have a pot of funds. So right now there's a pot of funds that is in your IPP. It's given to the regional center according to your plan. And that is administered by the case manager and by the regional center. So right now there are 2,500 people in the state of California who have been chosen for the initial pilot program. And in certain counties it's been allotted a certain number that will be able to try it out first. So that means, say my child likes aquatherapy, or this individual likes hippotherapy and they like a certain provider, or there's a certain respite provider or behavioral provider that you want, then you can decide who you're going to choose. So that does come with responsibility. So the tenets of the self-determination program are freedom, authority, support, responsibility, and confirmation. And so what I love about it is that it's very well defined. There is the individual, there is a financial management company who's going to pay the providers with the funds that have been allotted to you. So it's very important what is in your IPP and how you do your person-centered plan, and that's going to tell you how much funds are allotted. And then of course, if there are changes, you can come back and do another IPP before the end of the year, but it's typical that it would just be annual. And so the third component of that is the independent facilitator. So that can be a parent. There is debate about whether that can be a case manager because it's so akin to a supported decision-making team member. And that should really be somebody who's unbiased, who's looking directly at the individual. And all decisions are about the individual. So the independent facilitator is somebody who's going to find the resources that the person is interested in using and obtaining in their life. So if you're interested in aquatherapy, then they're going to help you find aquatherapy. They're going to help you manage everything. So what it does is it's acknowledging that people with disabilities need support, and they need freedom, and they need authority, and they need a responsibility and autonomy. And look, it's built in. They can have support, and this is how we can provide it. So in my area, I'm on the advisory committee for the independent facilitator program, and I can tell you it's rolling out now. Finally, it started in 2013, and we've been waiting 5 years. So right now in my area, I think there are 3 independent facilitators. So right now we're training people to learn about how you can be an independent facilitator. And parents can do that. And, you know, I think even with supported decision-making teams, we need to start where we are, where we start with what we have and go from there. So if a case manager for the regional center is someone that can help you do that, then I say you should do that. Other people find that that person is working for an agency and not maybe as unbiased as they would like them to be. So why does the supported decision, the self-determination program matter to supported decision making? And I kind of touched on that. Unbiased person sounds like a supported decision making team member. They're going to follow the person-centered plan. They're going to identify if they use supported decision making before they get to the person-centered plan process. And in rural areas, it's going to be really helpful. Like Lake Tahoe area, I don't think they have a lot of service providers. So if they have the self-determination program, they can pick Nancy, who's really great at doing the support that they need. So they can pick a caregiver. They can pick different respite agencies, and there's a lot more choice, and I think they're going to have more access to supports and services in rural areas. So, universal human rights. So every culture in the world agrees on universal human rights. And I talk about this originally I heard this in a speech at the ARC Public Policy Conference from Sue Swenson, who happens to be one of my favorite people. She was the Secretary of OSERS under Obama, and she had a son with a disability. He had a rare form of congenital muscular dystrophy and autism, exactly like my children. So she's an amazing speaker, and she talked a lot about human rights and about how her son did not have a means of communication. And so they used support people to help him be as independent as possible. So autonomy is intensely personal, unique according to each person's abilities, according to each person's challenges, their preferences, and their opportunities. So Article of Faith, physical or mental disabilities in no way diminish a person's right to fully participate in all aspects of society. And I think I'm going to stop right there and take another little break. I'm going to find out if we're going to be able to access the videos, and we'll come back in 5 minutes.